आज हम ये देखेंगे कि हमारे पास इतनी सारी लैंग्वेजेस क्यों हैं। हमारे पास कुछ ट्रेडिशनल लैंग्वेजेस आती हैं जैसे कि जावा, पाइथन, सी प्लस प्लस और जावास्क्रिप्ट। और हमारे पास कुछ मॉडर्न लैंग्वेजेस आती हैं जैसे कि कॉटलिन, टाइपस्क्रिप्ट, कॉफ़ी स्क्रिप्ट, रस्ट, गोलैंग, डार्ट और भी बहुत सारी होती हैं जैसे कि रूबी हो गया। और बहुत सारी होती हैं। यू हैव एक्सिलियर लैंग्वेज, बहुत सारी हैं। इतनी सारी लैंग्वेजेस क्यों हैं, राइट? वी हैव a certain number of software engineers who thinks that the more number of languages they know, the better they are as a software engineer, right? And we have a certain set of software engineers जो ये बोलते हैं कि we're just going to learn one language, and we are going to good at one language, like in terms of uh, like their logical ability, like data structures and algorithms, and they use a certain kind of other language for development. And they believe that it's their scope, like like okay, it's good that they know one language, but then they restrict themselves to that language, and they believe that they start believing that okay, I know one language. For example, I know Java very well. I have done DSA questions into it. I know JavaScript. But what about other languages? I don't understand other languages. I cannot write code into it. It's like it's limitation. So then both of them, these kind of software engineers, then they think that okay, we should be learning new languages. Like it becomes it kind of like okay, the more number of languages they learn, the better opportunities they may get. And it feels that it is true, but the underlying, if you understand the foundational principle of languages, all languages are same, and that is what we are going to discuss today. Like we even those we have all of these languages having a same principle, having the same logical ability to comprehend uh, for the computers into their machine code, zeros and ones, then why do we have so many languages? One might say that okay, different timelines पे different languages आई to solve different solutions. The meaning of engineering is that there is a problem and we have to solve it, so we need to make a path for it, right? And that is why ये languages जो हैं, they solve a very specific problem, right? And it's not like कि आपको एक language आती है तो आप बाकी नहीं सीख सकते. Let me give an example. मैं एक स्टोरी सुनाता हूँ, उससे आपको काफ़ी क्लैरिटी होगी. एक जावा स्क्रिप्ट का सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियर है जिसको 7 साल का एक्सपीरियंस है, ठीक है. उसने 7 साल तक जावा स्क्रिप्ट में कोड लिखा. अब वो एक सीनियर सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियर है. अब उसको कोड रिव्यू करना है अपने जूनियर्स का. लेकिन जूनियर ने कोड लिखा जावा में, क्योंकि कंपनी की रिक्वायरमेंट थी कि जावा में कोड लिखना है. अब क्या ये सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियर, सीनियर सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियर, क्या ये बोलेगा कि मेरे को जावा का कोड समझ ही नहीं आता, मैं तो जावा स्क्रिप्ट में कोड लिखता हूँ, मैं तो जावा स्क्रिप्ट डेवलपर हूँ? कभी नहीं बोलेगा. इट लाइक लॉजिकली सारा कोड उसे समझ आ रहा होगा. सिंटैक्टिकली, सेमेंटिकली जो लिटिल चेंजेस होंगे उसमें, ठीक है, he can learn it in less than 7 days, right? And that is the beauty of how, their experience in one language, the depth in one language. They have been using one language, but that doesn't mean they don't know other languages. They can use any language, right? It's just a matter of learning the syntax and a little bit of practice. तो इसका मतलब languages are just common, right? They are all same inherently. So even if you learn any one of them, you can learn any of them very much. It's like uh, if you're good at one programming language, you are good at all programming languages. It happens, it has an exponential growth and effect. That is why आप इंटरव्यूज में भी देखोगे, दे लाइक दे जस्ट से दैट यू नीड टू नो ए प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज एंड यू शुड बी वेरी गुड एट दैट प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज. इट्स नॉट लाइक कि आपको जितनी ज़्यादा प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेजेस आती हैं आप उतने अच्छे सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियर हो, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता. ठीक है, तो ये डिस्टिंक्शन हमने देखा काफ़ी अच्छे से. अब लेकिन हमें क्लियर नहीं हुआ है कि फिर भी हमारे पास इतने सारे लैंग्वेजेस क्यों हैं. ठीक है, हमारे पास देखो, सबसे पॉपुलर लैंग्वेज अगर आप चार्ट में देखोगे आपको मिलेगा कि जावास्क्रिप्ट सबसे पॉपुलर है और टाइपस्क्रिप्ट भी सबसे पॉपुलर है. क्यों? क्योंकि इसका यूज़ केस ज़्यादा है. आप the most of the internet is filled with web browsers and websites, and that is why it's used most. But that doesn't mean it's the best language, because there is no bad thing such as best language. And that also doesn't mean that other language doesn't have their own use cases or they are not used. Every language has its own use case and they are very specific. All languages are equal in terms of their ability, in terms of their scope, and that is the understanding, and that's what we're going to understand now. तो हम अगर लैंग्वेजेस की हिस्ट्री को देखें, उसकी टाइमलाइन को देखें, तो हमें पता है कि सबसे पहले सी लैंग्वेज आई थी, जिसमें हमारे पास कर्नल्स होते थे, ड्राइवर्स होते थे, और जो ग्राफिक्स प्रोग्रामिंग होती थी वो सी लैंग्वेज में करी जाती थी. बेसिकली सारी हार्डवेयर प्रोग्रामिंग आपकी सिर्फ कंप्यूटर के डिवाइसेस तक प्रोग्रामिंग सीमित नहीं है. आपके माइक्रो प्रोसेसर से लेके आपके जो भी मिलिट्री के टूल्स एंड टेक्नोलॉजीज होते थे, आई थिंक इन दैट टाइम लाइन सारे के सारे सी लैंग्वेजेस में लिखे जाते थे और वो फंक्शनल प्रोग्रामिंग में लिखे जाते थे. बट देन आपका अगर कोड बेस बहुत बड़ा हो जाए, 10,000 लाइन से बड़ा हो जाए, then of course you need a better methodology, a better way to write the code, and that is why C++ got introduced, because programmers were like finding difficulty, they had a problem and then they need a solution, like always, right? And they introduced a solution to like relate with the real world entities more so that they can understand the code better. So they built the principle of object oriented programming. However, C++ was machine independent, and that is why Java came into picture. Like in 2000s, it was at the time of websites. ठीक है, 2000s के टाइम पे वेबसाइट्स आई और उस टाइम पे जावा इंट्रोड्यूस हुई. Now, the beauty of Java was that it can run anywhere. It was able to run in any device, even in mobile phones, even in browsers, right? So at that time, Java was, just Java runtime environment was inbuilt with browsers, so that the interactivity could be introduced in the websites and web pages. बिकॉज उस टाइम पे जावास्क्रिप्ट नहीं होती थी, जावा होती थी. एंड it still has had a lot of bottlenecks because you need the Java runtime on their devices, तभी आपका जावा चल सकता था. क्योंकि जावा बाइट कोड के थ्रू, बाइट कोड वॉज अ लेयर दैट लाइक आपका कोड मशीन कोड में कन्वर्ट नहीं होगा, बाइट कोड में कन्वर्ट होगा. लेकिन बाइट कोड से मशीन कोड तक कन्वर्ट करने के लिए आपको एक कंपाइलर चाहिए, आपको एक रन टाइम एनवायरनमेंट चाहिए. ठीक है, और वो रन टाइम एनवायरनमेंट जो है दैट वाज मशीन डिपेंडेंट, दैट हैज़ डिपेंडेंट ऑन द आर्किटेक्चर, बिकॉज वही जो रन टाइम एनवायरनमेंट है वही आपके कोड बेस को समझ पाएगा और आपके मशीन के आर्किटेक्चर को समझ पाएगा और वही उसको कन्वर्ट कर पाएगा ज़ीरोज़ और वन में. एंड दैट इज़ वाई the portability of applications that you wrote in Java was maximum. But running Java itself was not like possible everywhere because you needed a Java runtime environment. And it had a lot of installation bottlenecks and headaches, which it's true till now as well. Uh, That is why, to solve that kind of a problems, we were introduced with JavaScript, right? JavaScript had this beauty, like it was possible to just, I mean, give interactivity to browser without having a particular, I mean, any kind of dependency to on any compiler, any runtime environment, anything at all. The browser itself became its own operating system. And it's like a mini operating system because it can run a programming language. So it came with the engine, right? So like Java had this runtime environment. It separate from the browser. You had to install the runtime environment onto your device yourself. Had all of those installation, I mean, issues and stuff like that. But JavaScript, you can just do it. I mean, you can just install the browser and those kind of functionalities, like installing the runtime environment, or maybe, I mean, the browser able to interpret your architecture and converting the JavaScript code into your machine code was native in the browser. So it became the responsibility of the browsers, right, to actually run this JavaScript engine. There were a lot of JavaScript engines that came into picture. For example, आपके Google Chrome का V8 इंजन आया था, आपके Firefox का खुद का इंजन आया था, Mozilla Firefox का, and we had a lot of engines. Like even if I search here JavaScript engines, right, you will have different kind of an engines list. We have Spider Monkey, yeah, that was a Firefox one. JavaScript Core, Hermes. There were a lot of ones, right? And even, yeah, V8 as the most famous one. Chakra is also the Microsoft engine. The Edge browser uses Chakra engine. So this is still true, and they are still being maintained till now as well, right? Now after JavaScript, like a lot of softwares were built with JavaScript, right? But the problem of JavaScript was that it was dynamic in nature, right? It did not had a lot of I mean, it was it had all of the features. Like the first and the foremost thing I forgot to tell you that JavaScript was a language that was built in 10 days by a developer, right? And because of that that particular guy, like added a lot of features, right? A lot of features. And then after we had a new JavaScript ES6 version, right? All of the missing features were also added. So it became a mess, right? It became a mess, and very difficult to I mean, interpret, right, the particular solution, the particular output. Why? Because JavaScript, like you can see in this, in the word, we have Java first. Why Java? Because in the timeline JavaScript was created, in the timeline JavaScript was created, the word Java was very popular. It was almost booming in that language. I mean, in that timeline or time frame. और उसके बाद आपकी ये स्क्रिप्ट का जो वर्ड लगा हुआ है, दैट मेक्स इट डायनामिक. ठीक है, स्क्रिप्ट मीन्स it like it was in that timeline. They believe that we are going to have a programming language where we are just going to use it for adding basic interactivity to the web browsers. So it has to be easy to program, easy to add the functionality. So we are going to make a language dynamic. By dynamic, it means we're not going to like uh, handle ourselves what is going to be the type of the data, right? The type of data, for example, integer or it is string. It is all going to be handled by the compiler itself. It is going to interpret and understand it well. It is it is it was thought to be a good approach, but it did not came out to be a good approach, because it makes the output unpredictable, right? The developers, as well as, I mean, the the engine, Javs could actually come up with some kind of an errors, which actually happen because जब आपका जो input आ रहा है, ठीक है। आपका कोड वेब ब्राउज़र पे लिखा गया है, ब्राउज़र पे इनपुट आएगा यूज़र्स की तरफ से, यूज़र तो कुछ भी डाल सकता है, यूज़र कुछ भी डालेगा और आपका इनपुट आएगा, तो आपके इनपुट जब आपका आउटपुट जाएगा, ठीक है, अब वो इनपुट जो है उसको आपको वैलिडेट तो कराना पड़ेगा कि इनपुट किस टाइप का होना चाहिए और किस टाइप का नहीं होना चाहिए, ठीक है। जिस टाइप का होना चाहिए उसी टाइप का मिलना चाहिए, ठीक है। और वो तब होता है जब आपकी लैंग्वेज में टाइप हो, ठीक है। और वो ही नहीं था इसमें, बिकॉज एट दैट मोमेंट दे थॉट कि हाँ ईजी होगा, बट इट केम इनटू समथिंग एल्स। दैट इज़ वाई उसके बाद टाइप स्क्रिप्ट आई, and TypeScript, what it introduced, the missing piece of JavaScript, it introduced the types onto the JavaScript, right? अब यहाँ पे क्या होता है ना, जब आपकी टाइप्स आ जाती है ना टाइप स्क्रिप्ट के अंदर, तो जो जावास्क्रिप्ट गेट सुपर पावर्स, राइट? I mean, it has a lot of its functionalities. It has functional programming principles. It has object-oriented programming principles. It also, I mean, like the basic foundation of where the JavaScript emerges from follows the same design of Java language. Like it starts from the object. It's also, then it had the missing problems were the types, and then TypeScript also solved it, right? TypeScript in itself is not a language. अपने आप में वो एक लैंग्वेज नहीं है, वो बस एक एडिशन है कि हमें टाइप्स भी चाहिए जावास्क्रिप्ट में, क्योंकि इनहेरेंटली जो आपकी वेबसाइट्स होती हैं वो अनप्रेडिक्टेबल होती हैं, राइट? तो हमें डाटा की वैलिडेशन तो चाहिए। तो दैट इज़ वाई हर लैंग्वेज का अपना यूज़ केस था, अपने टाइमलाइन पे वो इंट्रोड्यूस्ड हुआ, ठीक है। और अभी लास्ट में आपकी जावास्क्रिप्ट और टाइपस्क्रिप्ट जो है वो डेवलपमेंट में सबसे ज़्यादा चल रही है, ठीक है। किस रीज़न से? इसी रीज़न से कि उसमें सारी फंक्शनैलिटीज़ है, ठीक है। एंड इन इट्स नॉट दैट कि उसमें सारी फंक्शनैलिटीज़ हैं, दैट इज़ वाई इट इज़ मोस्ट पॉपुलर। इट बिकेम द आई मीन द नेटिव लैंग्वेज फॉर द ब्राउजर्स, ठीक है। नेटिव लैंग्वेज फॉर ब्राउजर्स to understand them, and it got of like it is their luck, it is the luck of JavaScript that I mean it gets the edge over other languages because they are not native at all, right? You have, I mean, they do not run natively on browsers, and that is why, because websites are everywhere, that is why JavaScript became popular, and that is why you should also learn JavaScript, not because JavaScript is better than other languages, but because it's like it's the obvious language for browsers to understand. And everything like in the timeline of software engineering, softwares have started from websites, from the internet, from the interactivity. You yourself have been, I mean, use websites, browsers a lot more than other things, right? And that is the reason it is the most popular language, uh, not because it is the best language, but because it is a native language for the browsers, right? And then we have other languages as well, like we have Kotlin, right? There is a very interesting story behind Kotlin. जावा पुरानी होने वाली हो रही थी थोड़ी थोड़ी, ठीक है। तो जावा को ना एंड्रॉयड में भी यूज़ किया जाता है, ठीक है। एंड्रॉयड में क्यों? क्योंकि जावा हर जगह यूज़ हो सकता है। तो सम स्मार्ट पीपल थॉट क्यों ना हम जावा के बाइट कोड को ना एंड्रॉयड में डाल देते हैं, ठीक है। तो आप एक छोटा सा डिवाइस लेते हैं और एक छोटे से डिवाइस में बाइट कोड से हम उसका डिवाइस, उसका ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम बनाएंगे, और उस ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम को हम एंड्रॉयड नाम दे देंगे। एंड फॉर द फर्स्ट वर्जन ऑफ एंड्रॉयड वॉज वेरी अगली, इट वॉज नॉट गुड एट ऑल, some people might have remembered. And now after a lot of updates, of years of updates and optimizations, it looks fantastic, it is so beautiful, but it still has its core operating system running in Java, right? That it is built in Java. But as per the evolution of languages such as JavaScript and TypeScript, people use TypeScript a lot in development and things like that. And it has a lot of features native for the development. Java was not built for development, it was built for some other purposes, right? is as per its own timeline. Now we need a lot more features to ease the development of mobile applications, right, of Android. And that is why in Android we needed a new set of tools, a new set of way of doing things for Android developers specifically. And that is why we got the language Kotlin, which was actually introduced by JetBrains. And that is why Kotlin is also a very famous language. I mean, it's actually the it has become the most trusted language for Android. And also Google also recommends you to use Kotlin only for Android. However, Kotlin in itself has no existence without Java, because Kotlin is also an extension on Java, right? And that does not mean Kotlin is a different language and you have to learn something different from Java, right? And that is why I'm telling you, all languages are interconnected. All languages have one foundation, one principle, and one way of thinking over things. And the transition is actually very less if you have solid foundation in one language, right? Okay. Similarly, CoffeeScript, uh, Rust language, Go language, they have been introduced for backend development, right? Then we go into the branch of backend development. And in backend development, we needed a way, it's like, in which we can write small code, so small lines of code, where we could write small backend services. And that is where Golang was introduced, right, for backend. Then we had Python, which also came in its own timeline, when you need math computations, right? And Python was mostly English like. It was English like. So people who were not used to programming languages were more likely to use Python. Before Python, we had R language, right? R language was also used for mathematical computations. We also MATLAB was also used back then. So then, these people who were using, who were like doing PhD and all sort of things, they had this demand to in Python, that okay, we need libraries, you can, and developers built that. And that is how Python evolved today into the AI and ML language. But it's not something different from Java or JavaScript. It's the same language. If we think about Dart language, Dart language is used in mobile. It was built by Google for a cross platform, uh, for building cross platform applications, right? Which is used in their Flutter SDK, right? So it was a tool built by them, right? So that you can um, make the applications better. Right? How you're designing the code is native to how you're designing the applications, right, in the particular language Dart. But when I got introduced to the Dart language, it mixed everything up. It mixed some of the JavaScript codes, a concept of JavaScript codes, some of the concept of Java, some of the concept of Python. It was so amazing to understand and see the principles getting connected. Like Java in like Dart language also in itself had no new concept. It was all same. It was all the and getting repeated again and again. That is why I came to know, okay, there is something, some connection between everything, these languages, and especially in people. Like when you think about who designed these languages, these new languages, senior engineers who have 10 to 20 years of experiences. These senior engineers, where do they get these ideas to design the languages, to create new languages? They get these ideas from the previous languages, right? From their experiences of how they have used the languages, what are the uh, things that they think are missing in those languages, and they add it as an additional kind of features or principles or syntactic sugar that makes it easier for them to go, right? Then we had Rust language. Rust language is my favorite language, uh, because it it's like it handles the low language programming really well. Why do I really like this language? Is because it has one way of doing things. It is opinionated, right? So even if you have 10,000 lines of code, you know that if you read that 10,000 lines of code written by someone else, you will be able to understand it, because it is not written in the way only he understands. It is written in only one way, because there is only one way of writing this code language. And that is why, I mean, in the kernel level, in the drivers level, Rust language is being adopted more nowadays than C++, because it avoids the problem of segmentation fault. What is segmentation fault? It is actually memory leaks. मतलब आपके जो memory होती है एरेज में, वो memory, आपका जो एड्रेस है, आपके एड्रेस पे आप कोई डाटा निकालने की कोशिश करो, लेकिन उस एड्रेस पे कोई वैल्यू ही नहीं है, वो एड्रेस ही नहीं एग्जिस्ट करता है ना, ठीक है? तो आपका क्या होगा, आपका कोड फट जाएगा, आपका कोड फट जाएगा मतलब आपका क्रैश हो जाएगा। तो वो प्रॉब्लम सी प्लस प्लस में होती थी, जो अभी रस्ट लैंग्वेज में नहीं होती है, ठीक है? और भी इसमें काफ़ी सारे फीचर्स हैं। सो इट हैज़ इट ओन डोमेन, इट हैज़ इट्स ओन इम्पोर्टेंस, ठीक है? It has its own unique way of doing things, but the fundamental principles that Rust language uses is not different from C language, like, right? The way in which how Rust language uh, has created its own ecosystem of concepts, like वो क्या करते हैं ना, वो Rust language में जो community है, they have their own convention of like uh, saying things, जैसे आपके जावा में, अगर आपके जावास्क्रिप्ट में किसी चीज़ को आप पैकेजेस बोलते हो, ठीक है, तो आपके रस्ट लैंग्वेज में आप उसे क्रेड्स बोलते हो, ठीक है? तो आपकी नेमिंग कन्वेंशंस डिफरेंट हो सकते हैं, लेकिन आपके अंडरलाइंग कॉन्सेप्ट सेम ही होंगे, ठीक है? एंड व्हेन यू हर्ड इट फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम, ओके, what are crates? I don't know what crates. You will get confused if you directly jump into Rust language or Go language, because you don't have the fundamental understanding of what a package is, right? What are those things? Because that is why uh, if you go in any language and any domain, all domains are just interconnected and built by the same kind of engineers, same kind of people who have the same experience with the companies, same kind of, right? And they the same mindset, the same opinions. They also want clean code, they also want good design patterns, they also want the stuff, they want to solve a specific problem. And that is why whenever you talk about any language, you do not go by their language just because you like that language, but because that language is solving a particular problem, a particular use case, right? Now if we understand so much of things, like, do we really understand now why do we have so many languages? Of course we do, right? But the question arises, do we really need to understand all of these languages? Do we really need to learn all of these languages at once? Absolutely not, right? If not, like, what language should we start with? कौन सी लैंग्वेज होगी जिससे हमें स्टार्ट करना चाहिए? It doesn't matter, right? You can start with any languages. The first and foremost language should be the most easiest language, right? The most foundational language, from which everything starts, right? From which every programming language has started, that is C language, no doubt. That builds your foundation of the programming, which is common in every programming language, right? Then you understand that a lot of functionalities such as object-oriented programming and stuff like that, you learn it through C language. You can also learn it through Java, you can also learn it through JavaScript, because it's in all languages. It's not very language specific and stuff and things like that. So if you ask me what language you should start with, and you should be, you have to be really good at it, right? It's not like कि अभी हमने ये language सीखी 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, then we switch to another language because we know the basics of that language. We are able to understand, code and build small things into that language. No, अगर आप दूसरी लैंग्वेज में स्विच करोगे बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट सीखने के बाद, दैट मीन्स यू विल हैव द बेसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ दिस लैंग्वेज एंड यू विल हैव द बेसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ द अदर लैंग्वेज एज वेल। ठीक है, तो आपकी दोनों लैंग्वेजेस जो होंगी वो वीक ही रहने वाली हैं। ठीक है, दैट इज़ नॉट द वे टू एक्चुअली लाइक गेट द इन डेप्थ अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ वन लैंग्वेज। क्योंकि फॉर एग्जाम्पल, लाइक लेट मी गिव यू एन एग्जाम्पल। ठीक है, what is the language here which is unavoidable? What is the language here that you will definitely be encountering in your uh, software engineering career, no matter where you go, right? The most encountered language would be TypeScript, right? TypeScript, which is also has the foundation in JavaScript, right? The second most could be Python. The third most could be Java, right? But that is why I recommend starting with JavaScript. Why? Because it also has the object oriented principles, it also has the functional principles, and it's I mean it has it's a lot of nitty gritty, uh, stuff which actually makes you play with it. Like you can run it anywhere, you can run it in a browser, you can run it in your laptop devices using runtime environments, right? So JavaScript has a lot of flexibility, and because of this flexibility, like you can build stuff, you can build things into it, you can enjoy, you can experiment with this language. If you go with Java, you cannot like experiment it that much, you cannot build front end into it. It brings some limitation to you, limitations to your creativity, limitations to you, the domains and the scopes you can go into. C++ brings a lot of more limitations to development in itself, right? If you go in any domain, if you go into Rust language, Go language, they are more inclined towards backend, right? And if you go to Python, that is inclined towards AI/ML and some of backend stuff as well. JavaScript is the only language which is friendly to everything. If you have a tool, a framework, or anything at all, JavaScript will be the first language where that framework, that tool will be created, right? Where that idea will be evolved, and then it will come to all the languages. Why? Because it is so flexible and easy, because it is browser native, anybody can build and ship things fast. So it is an unavoidable and very most precious language to learn. So being an expert in JavaScript takes time, right? Because I believe other languages are easier in terms of JavaScript, because it introduced a lot of other features. Like you have web browser features which are native to the JavaScript, because JavaScript is running inside the browser, right? So if you uh, but the learnings and the tools and the principles that you learn in any of those languages will be same in all, right? But if we start with JavaScript, we will definitely be able to get into the development side much faster, get an understanding of the systems and how the system design works, right? And how we can use the tools that we have in hand in order to build what we have an idea of, what we want to build, right? So we will definitely start with JavaScript, but it's not going to be just about JavaScript. But whatever we learn, whatever we go in the future, we are going to definitely relate it with all languages, whether that be Java, C++, Python. We will try to do that, right? And apart from this, even if we have a lot of languages, do not be afraid of other people telling you that they know a lot of languages, right? They are not expert in all languages, they are expert in one language, and that is what we are going to do as well. Language is just a tool, Language is just a means. Language is a technology. Language has no existence in itself. Without the problem, right? Without the problem that you have to solve, what are you going to do with the language, right? Language is a tool that will help you solve the problem, whether that be in terms of algorithms, whether that be in terms of business impact, right? So every language has its own specific way of solving a problem. And even today in this time also, हर लैंग्वेज की अपनी खुद की इम्पोर्टेंस है, because they are solving a specific problem in their own ways, right? So today we have learned about this, and tomorrow we are going to have a better understanding of how languages work internally, right? We will explore that.